Blood once spilled upon the sand of Kano was not that of invaders, but of brothers, princes born of the same palace, raised on the same tales, taught by the same tutors, and blessed by the same ancestors, turned sword against sword in one of the most tragic conflicts in West African royal history. What could make a prince betray his own bloodline? What forces ignited the fire that would engulf an ancient house, a kingdom from within? This is the story of the Kano Civil War of 1893, a tale of royal ambition, betrayal, colonial shadows, and the unraveling of a dynasty. To understand the war that tore Kano apart, one must first walk through the grand, sun-scorched gates of the city itself, where the smell of leather, spices, and horses filled the air. For centuries, Kano was a jewel in the savannah. Founded around the 10th century, it rose from a modest settlement to a thriving emirate, forged through iron, trade, and Islam. It became a spiritual and commercial center, famed for its dye pits, its scholarship, and its mastery of the trans-Saharan trade routes that brought wealth from across North and West Africa. By the late 19th century, Kano stood as a powerful emirate within the Sokoto Caliphate, a confederation of Fulani-led Islamic states. But beneath the surface of prosperity and piety, tensions simmered, and at the center of it all was a family, the royal descendants of the House of Dabo. Emir Abdullahi Maj Karofi had ruled Kano since 1855, a shrewd leader whose reign had been marked by both reform and bloodshed. He came from the prestigious Dabo dynasty, itself founded by the great Emir Ibrahim Dabo in 1819. Under their rule, Kano had grown powerful and wealthy, but it had also become entangled in internal politics, Islamic reform, and the growing threat of European colonialism lurking just beyond its borders. When Emir Abdullahi died in 1882, a new chapter began, but not one of peace. His chosen successor was his son, Mohammed Tukur. Born into privilege and trained for rule, Tukur was intelligent, devout, and respected. But he was also surrounded by rivals, chief among them, his own brothers. One of them, Yusuf bin Abdullahi, better known to history as Yusuf Maituta, was not content to stand in the shadow of his half-brother. There were whispers in the corridors of the palace that Yusuf believed the emirate should have been his. Some said the elders favored him. Others claimed he had been overlooked due to his more fiery, warlike temperament. Whatever the case, Yusuf did not forget the insult. What followed was a slow, simmering descent into chaos. For a decade after Tukur's ascension, Kano remained outwardly stable, but factions formed, nobles and military leaders quietly picking sides, allying with either the sitting emir or the ambitious prince in exile. And then, in the year 1893, the silence was shattered. Yusuf Maituta, who had fled the city, returned not with gifts or apologies, but with an army. Supported by disaffected nobles, aggrieved merchants, and warriors loyal to his cause, Yusuf launched a campaign to seize the throne by force. The plains of Kano, once fertile and bustling with trade caravans, became battlegrounds. Farmers fled their lands. Horses thundered across dry riverbeds. Brothers, some barely teenagers, stood across from each other with drawn blades. The Hausa chroniclers, whose handwritten records survive today in Arabic script, describe the war as fetina, a word loaded with meaning. It signifies not just conflict, but dangerous internal strife, civil breakdown, and spiritual testing. It was not simply war. It was a calamity. The first shock came when Yusuf's forces swept through the northern frontier, capturing key towns and gaining the allegiance of influential Fulani aristocrats who had grown disillusioned with Tukur's rule. The emir's advisors urged restraint, suggesting negotiation, but Emir Tukur, convinced of his divine mandate, refused to recognize Yusuf's claim. He believed himself chosen not just by blood, but by Allah. The decisive confrontation came near the town of Dawakan Kudu, not far from the gates of Kano city itself. The dry air was thick with dust and heat. Riders adorned in quilted armor and charms sewn into leather amulets met in thunderous collision. Swords clashed, war chants echoed, and for hours, the battlefield was a blur of motion, cries, and blood. Yusuf's army, fighting with the ferocity of rebels who believed they had been wronged, gained the upper hand. Tukur's forces, though larger and better supplied, were betrayed by some of their own commanders. In a stunning and painful blow, Yusuf's army broke through the royal guard and forced Emir Tukur to retreat into the ancient walls of Kano. For the next few weeks, the city became a fortress besieged. Within the city, panic and dread spread like wildfire. Women wailed in the streets. Markets stood still. The ancient mosques, once filled with serene calls to prayer, now echoed with desperate pleas for protection. Then came the betrayal. A key commander inside the city, whose name is lost to time, opened the Kofar Nasarawa gate under the cover of darkness. Yusuf's forces poured in. The palace was stormed. Emir Tukur fled southward, seeking refuge among loyalists in Takai. The throne was Yusuf's, or so he believed. What Yusuf Maituta had won with swords, he struggled to hold with scepters. Though victorious, Yusuf's rule was marred by chaos. Many still viewed him as an usurper. He lacked the broad legitimacy that his brother had held. The civil war had fractured Kano's social and spiritual fabric. Trade routes collapsed, scholars fled. The powerful merchant class, once the lifeblood of the city, withdrew support. Yusuf ruled, but the city bled. And just beyond the horizon, new forces were stirring, watching and waiting. The British Empire had long cast its gaze on the Sokoto Caliphate and its powerful emirates, including Kano, though still technically independent. The region was being slowly strangled by European commercial expansion and diplomatic manipulation. And to the British, civil war was not a tragedy, it was an opportunity. Years later, when British forces finally stormed Kano in 1903, they found a city still reeling from the wounds of internal conflict. The once mighty emirate, weakened by a decade of fratricidal war, could offer little resistance. Yusuf himself had died in 1894, just a year after taking the throne, his reign ending as violently as it had begun. It is said that as he lay dying, Yusuf whispered regret, but whether that is legend or truth, no one knows. Emir Tukur never reclaimed the throne. He died in exile, his dream of returning to rule buried with him. Today, the tale of the Kano Civil War lives on in oral traditions, palace chronicles, and the haunting ruins of the old Emir's palace. Scholars still debate what drove Yusuf. Was it ambition, injustice, divine destiny? Or was he merely a symptom of deeper fractures within the Hausa aristocracy and the creeping death of pre-colonial sovereignty? The Dabo dynasty continues to rule Kano in a ceremonial capacity under modern Nigeria, but the scars of 1893 remain, a reminder of how royal blood, once spilled, cannot be gathered back. And here lies the great historical paradox. The Civil War was not merely a family feud, it was the slow collapse of an entire political order. The fall of one brother to another echoed the fall of an entire civilization to the waiting hands of empire. But here is the mystery. Buried deep within the palace archives are accounts that suggest a third figure, a prince whose loyalty wavered, whose betrayal may have tipped the war's balance. His name rarely appears in official records, erased perhaps by shame or politics. But if he did exist, what did he gain? What secrets lie hidden in the sand-colored walls of the old city of Kano? And what of the whispers that the British had already made contact with Hausa dissidents years before the fall, seeding chaos from within? We may never know the full truth, but history, as it often does, leaves just enough threads for the curious to follow. If this story moved you, intrigued you, or left you questioning, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to History Off the Map, where we explore the untold, the unresolved, and the unforgettable. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us, what do you think truly caused the fall of Kano's royal brotherhood? The past isn't just behind us, it's buried, waiting to be uncovered.